according to the Twisted Left, by calling for the death of a leading political candidate, you're actually saving democracy.
Tens of thousands of left-wing rioters flooded the streets of Paris on Sunday night in opposition to this victory.
I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjakovic. And we are unapologetically outspoken. Hey everybody, happy Friday. We hope you all had a great 4th of July and that you at least took a few minutes to honor the history of our once great nation that we hope Trump is going to make great again when you were doing your celebration. And so, Stephanie, speaking of Trump, like on Monday, we talked about a bunch of Supreme Court rulings and how they were expected to rule on Trump's presidential immunity case later in the day. And indeed, they did. And we didn't cover this on Wednesday because we had released a pre-recorded episode. But in case you haven't heard about it, the Supreme Court ruled that ex-presidents do have significant immunity protection from prosecution for official acts committed while in office. So, of course, the sheep on the left immediately lost their fucking minds as soon as this came out. AOC was calling for Supreme Court justices to be impeached. People were calling for Trump's assassination. Biden said it was a dangerous precedent and that now this means there's no limit on what a president can do. And then he claimed that the character of a president will now have to define the limits of the office's power since there's no longer law in place to do it. And he said, quote, "I know I will respect the limits of presidential power as I have for 3.5 years," end quote. No, you've just been losing your faculties and making a mockery of the country on the world stage for the past 3.5 years, and you have no fucking idea where you even are 90% of the time. But Stephanie, as good as some of these comments are, I'm sure you must have seen some really good shit of these leftist meltdowns on TikTok.
Oh, yeah. It is taking TikTok by storm. So there's two clips that have gone viral that everyone is sharing. So I'm going to play them both. The first one is from Leah Delaria, and she played Big Boo on Orange is the New Black. Did you ever watch that show?
I didn't. I heard it was good. I've never
It
seen
was
it.
such a good show, and I loved Big Boo. And so now I'm really disappointed because she was amazing on that show, but it looks like she came down with a case of Trump derangement syndrome. So listen to this clip that she posted on social media that has just gone like crazy viral.
Uncle Thomas, fuck you. Joe, you now have the right to take that bitch Trump out. Take him out, Joe. If he was Hitler and this was 1940, you'd take him out. Well, he is Hitler and this is 1940. Take him the fuck out.
Okay, so it's 1940, I guess. So there
Oh my
was that.
God.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like
These
literally.
people are delusional.
Well, I know. And like literally like calling for an ex-president and the leading presidential candidate to be murdered just sounds like a bad idea. I mean, I wouldn't do that for Biden, but these people are crazy. But this one's even better. Okay, so there is this liberal Trump-hating activist. His name is Harry Sisson. And this guy is all over TikTok. And so he posted, I guess, on X, he posted, quote, "According to the Supreme Court, Biden could send in SEAL Team 6 to take all of them out. He could send in the military to take out Trump." Well, guess what? Karma is a bitch, because I want you to listen to what Trump's campaign people responded with. So take a listen to this.
Trump's campaign manager just threatened me on social media. I'm not joking.
Hey, Harry, Trump campaign here. Look, I know you've got to be smarter than this. So what you're trying to imply here is that Chris gave a threat towards you, when in fact, we all know what Chris meant by that. And what is going to happen is within the next 72 hours of you making that ridiculous emotional tweet, you will have a visit from the U.S. Secret Service. Now, you may think that's no big deal, and you're not going to be charged with anything more than likely. However, allow me to explain to you what you can expect next. You see, when I'm asked, I always describe the US Secret Service as being the most powerful entity within the US government. Now, they are absolutely tasked with some of the hardest work of any individual in the government. And they will absolutely protect whomever their protectee is, despite their own political beliefs, their bias, or anything else that may come in and interfere with them. You may not think anything is wrong with that tweet because you're likely not going to be charged, right? But you're going to end up on a list. And what that list is going to do is absolutely prevent you from ever visiting your friend Joe Biden again, whether he is in office or post presidency. It's going to keep you from entering any federal building in Washington, D.C., or anywhere else in this country where an elected official is at the time of your visit. TSA pre-check, regular TSA check, expedited passport, expedited reentry, global entry. All of that, my friends, you're going to have a little bit of an issue with it. So you could essentially kiss your activist career goodbye. Because even if the Democrats love you and they want you, you're not going to be allowed around any of them. And to stop and think that you made all of this happen because you were unable to contain your emotions, you went on Twitter and you made a tweet that implied or incited violence against the former president of the United States. You did all of this without even making any sense because the ruling by the Supreme Court doesn't even define what is within the scope of official duties. The Supreme Court themselves even said that needs to be defined by the lower courts. So what you stated here is absolutely asinine, but yet you couldn't hold your emotions. You had to run to Twitter, you had to run your mouth, and you had to lose all control just for a couple of clicks and views.
I thought that was such a good comeback.
I love
And
that. Yeah.
it's so true. It's like everything is so emotional and like not founded in reason. Like he said, they want the lower courts to decide what's within the scope. So they're like coming up with all these crazy accusations that aren't even founded in reality. Just like they keep saying how Trump is the, author of Project 2025 when he literally
Right.
has like nothing to do
Not.
with it. So it's just ridiculous, but I think that's hilarious that now this guy is on that list and now he gets to experience what all the January 6ers have to experience every time they want to fly or go in a government building. So yeah, karma's a bitch, Harry Sisson. Oh my gosh. And like, it's just crazy because getting back to like Big Boo or Leah or whatever her name is, it's like if you call for fair elections and you question the legitimacy of elections, right? The left calls you a MAGA extremist and you're the biggest domestic threat to democracy, according to Homeland Security. But you can literally call for Trump's assassination, and that's perfectly okay. In fact, according to the twisted left, by calling for the death of a leading political candidate, you're actually saving democracy. And you know what? By censoring half of America, that's saving democracy too. It's like you have to be so ignorant or just in complete denial to not see the hypocrisy and constantly bringing up January 6th and how like the right was chanting hang Pence or like whatever it was they were saying. But then the left asks for Trump to be killed and they like think it's cute. They think it's like totally justified. And I mean it's just so ridiculous, but I must say I am thoroughly enjoying seeing them panic. Like after everything they did over the past 4 years to patriotic Americans, they deserve to panic. They deserve everything that's coming to them.
Yeah, it's just like when, the Roe v. Wade decision came out, right? And the left just like lost their minds. They have no idea what it actually means because they don't pay attention to what the ruling was. And like with this ruling, it doesn't mean that Trump is cleared of charges yet. All it means, like you said, is that the case is going back to the lower court to make that determination about whether Trump was acting in an official or unofficial capacity, right? And so I want to read out what Chief Justice John Roberts wrote because he said, quote, "The president enjoys no immunity for his unofficial acts, and not everything the president does is official. The president is not above the law, but Congress may not criminalize the president's conduct in carrying out the responsibilities of the executive branch under the Constitution. The president, therefore, may not be prosecuted for exercising his core constitutional powers, and he is entitled, at a minimum, to a presumptive immunity from prosecution for all his official acts. That immunity applies to all occupants of the Oval Office, regardless of politics, policy, or party," end quote. So this is a pretty fair ruling, and it doesn't have the potential to just protect Trump. Like, this can be applied to Biden as well. And so now the lower courts are going to have to hold hearings and decide whether or not these charges against Trump were based on official acts while he was president or not. And from what I read, it's predicted that like the decision's not even going to be reached until after the election, right? But I question, like, with the way the Biden admin is so desperately trying to hold on to power at this point, like, I wouldn't be surprised if the court and the jurors are coerced into like acting on this before the election so that they can put Trump in prison.
Oh, I'm sure they're going to get really desperate at this point. I was listening to a bunch of podcasts on my ride home from the LGBTQ headquarters. I mean, Disney World. And I heard some really interesting arguments from attorneys. And they were saying that they believe that this will give Trump immunity in terms of like the election interference charges that had to do with like January 6th. And it was a really interesting argument because they were saying that Trump speaking to that massive crowd on January 6th and asking Congress to like hold off on certifying the election was technically an official act. And when you're president and you're speaking to the people about wrongdoing in the country and you're asking Congress to fix it, that's an official act. And if it's not considered an official act, then the president going down the street to give the State of the Union speech, asking Congress to act and calling half of the country extremists wouldn't be considered official either.
Yeah.
So it has to be one or the other. Like, you can't have it both ways. And if the left wants to play stupid games, then they're going to win stupid prizes because just like you said, Tara, this is going to apply to the left and the right. And I don't know if you can tell, but like, I actually feel really optimistic with all of these rulings and with everything that's happening and like post the debate. I feel like the gig is up. Like, the left is done. And I do believe that good wins in the end. And I feel like all the things that the left and the media did is crystal clear. I think everyone can see it now. And I think justice is going to bite them in the ass because they've destroyed the country, but they've also destroyed their party in the making. Like, after the debate and these Supreme Court rulings, it highlights all of the lies that they've been telling the American people and how they've been covering for a president who's mentally gone. And they've basically just let the extremists in their party take over and wreak havoc. And I do believe justice is starting to be served, beginning with clearing Trump from these ridiculous charges. And even in the Stormy Daniels case, Judge Merchan is like shitting his pants. Okay. So after this latest Supreme Court ruling, Trump's attorneys immediately asked the court to allow them to file a motion to overturn the verdict. And Trump's attorneys, Todd Blanche and Emil Bove, said that their motion will argue that based on the Supreme Court's decision, prosecutors should not have been allowed to introduce evidence about official acts that Trump took while in office. And so in a brief response, Merchan approved the proposed schedule and wrote that he'll render a decision on Trump's motion on September 6th. So this is like, what, 2 months later than originally set. And he set a new sentencing date of September 18th, but said if such is still necessary. And so I think that we're going to start seeing these cases fall apart because all of these charges and all of the evidence and everything that they brought against Trump, they now have to go through all of that to see what would be considered official and what wouldn't. And I just think like it's going to completely unravel everything they had set up to put him in prison.
You mean like the Biden admin is unraveling?
Exactly.
Because as we talked about earlier this week, like ever since the debate, the rats are jumping ship with their loyalty to Biden. I think two Democrat Congress members have publicly declared no confidence in Biden this week. On Wednesday, it was reported by multiple sources that at least 25 frontline Democrats in Congress are now prepared to demand that he withdraw from the election if he, quote, seems shaky in coming days, end quote. Wisconsin Senator Tammy Baldwin reportedly refused to join Biden for his campaign visit to Madison, which I believe is taking place today. But of course, you've got the diehards like Pelosi and Kamala and KJP, and they just continue to state that they're in full support of Biden staying in the race, even though they are publicly acknowledging his cognitive decline. And so I haven't played a good clip from KJP in a while, and I've got two I want to play here right now. And these are both from her being questioned after Biden's performance at the debates.
The president saying, I am not a young man. I'm not as a smooth talker as I used to be. I don't walk as easily as I used to be. I don't debate as well as I used to. I mean, the president is admitting and saying, and this is not the first time, right? He's talked about his age. He's joked about his age many times before. And so you heard that directly from, and we are acknowledging what people are seeing.
Let's get some.
So she's acknowledging what people are seeing, right? And now I want to play this other clip. And this was, I believe, from yesterday.
The American people first, and delivering for them.
Can you also clarify Simon's question?
Sure.
I mean, how is it that the president was still tired 12 days after returning from Europe, had a cold, but then went to the Waffle House, and then the following day staged such a huge comeback that he gave those North Carolina remarks? Like, help us understand.
Have you had a cold before?
Of course it has.
Okay, so you probably, well, come on, Jackie. Let's be let's be.
Days after he returned them.
But
And
you also,
jet lag yesterday.
hold on a second. There's a cold, there's a jet lag. You combine that. He continues to work on for the American people day in and day out around the clock. Things happen. And the cold thing is something that you all pointed out during his debate. We didn't even point that out. You all pointed out when you heard his voice being hoarse because he knew he had to push through. He knew he has to power through. That's what presidents do. If you care about this country, you don't care about yourself. You care about the American people. You care about delivering for this country. You care about how you're going to continue to work every day in and day out. You push through. We've all do that.
Because all these Democrats
We've
who are
all
saying
do
they want
that.
to see him.
Push through, Stephanie.
So is he just going to push through the next 4 years? Like he can't even push through one debate? Like give me a break.
Well, have you noticed that since the debate, like he hasn't taken any press questions at any of his campaign stops this week? All he does is read his pre-recorded script from the teleprompter, which he can't even do correctly because he's reading it wrong and he's still fucking making mistakes.
Yep. Oh, I know. I heard him say like end of quote or something. But I did hear there were a lot of reporters going at KJP and they were like, he's 30 steps away. Why not just have him come out right now and talk to us? And then one reporter's like, if he's even awake, like they're turning on him, you know? But I saw him give a speech. I think it was the day after where he seemed hopped up again on whatever drugs they're giving him. And like TikTok was having a field day with it because it appeared that he had tanner on his face because his face was like orange like Trump's. And the night before in the debate, he was like so pale. And then the next day, all of a sudden, he's like orange. So everyone was like laughing and just like, what is happening here? And I mean, I think if they really believe that a spray tan and Adderall is going to change the public's opinion, like they're sadly mistaken. I mean, he's done. He's done, and they don't want to admit it. And I just saw a quote right before we got on where Biden supposedly um told someone they're not going to push me out. So he's going to cling
Yeah,
on.
exactly. He is still continuing to defend himself and he's like refusing to step down from this race. But then is that the case? Because I keep seeing so much mixed information. He's publicly stating that he's still in it. And when he was in North Carolina earlier this week, he said something about how like he wouldn't be running again if he didn't believe with all his heart and soul that he could do the job. And I think this was one of his Adderall moments. But like things change by the hour. Like this might be a different story before this episode even airs because he's been meeting with people left and right trying to save himself. He met with Democratic members of Congress on Wednesday and tried to convince them he's doing fine and told them that he had a medical exam earlier in the week and the doctor gave him a thumbs up. And then yesterday he had an emergency meeting with Democrat governors, and I guess it turned into a shit show because Hochul, whatever the fuck you say her name, the governor of New York, she said like that they all unanimously supported him. So then several other Democratic governors stood up and they denied that. And they said they don't believe he can beat Trump. So they don't support his campaign. And Hochul had no right to speak for them. But you know who was there, Stephanie? It was Newsom. And what did he say? Afterwards, he posted on X and he said, quote, I heard 3 words from the president tonight. He's all in, and so am I, end quote. Yeah, we bet you're all in, right? But then even before this meeting, earlier in the week, Biden has been like just on a run to meet with everybody. He had conversations with Pelosi, with Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Senator Chris Coons, Rep. Jim Clyburn. Like he's trying to get all these people to stick with him. But then I read a Daily Wire article on Wednesday saying that Biden had informed a quote key ally that he's thinking about dropping out of the race. And then ABC News reported that Biden privately told 2 people close to him that he's keeping an open mind about his path forward and his decision will depend on how he's received the rest of the week during these scheduled campaign events in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. And of course, the White House is like adamantly denying all of this. They're saying he has no plans to step down or step aside. But that last clip I played from KJP, this all came about because of his latest excuse for why his performance was so bad at the debate. And he was at a campaign event in Virginia on Tuesday, and he said, quote, the fact is that I wasn't very smart. I decided to travel around the world a couple times, going through around 100 time zones before the debate. I don't know how many time zones. For real, I think it's 15 time zones. I didn't listen to my staff and came back and nearly fell asleep on stage. That's no excuse, but it is an explanation, end quote. Like, didn't the White House say you had a cold? And so, like that reporter said, was it a cold? Was it jet lag? How about neither of the above? Because once again, Lion Biden was caught telling fibs. He did not just come back from traveling the world a couple times during 100 time zones or 15 time zones or even 2 fucking time zones. He was at the G7 conference. Earlier in the month, he came back on June 15th from Europe. The debate was 2 weeks later on the 27th. He had no problem attending this fancy Hollywood fundraising event the week after he got back from Europe. That reporter mentioned he went to some kind of diner or something. We know he was at Camp David for a week rehearsing the debate. From everything,
an
a
entire
week.
week
Yes,
rehearsing that shit show that he performed. Like it's
I know
unbelievable.
it is. And from what I read, like he rested a lot. Like he didn't start debate prep until 11 a.m. every day. He took naps every afternoon. And I was reading an article in The Blaze. The managing editor of townhall.com, Spencer Brown, he said, quote, if he can't recover from a trip to Europe in a week in these easy conditions, he just can't be president, which is the fucking truth. And by the way, like speaking of his trip to Europe for the G7 conference, all these world leaders who were at the conference, they're fucking coming out now and expressing their supposed shock at Biden's cognitive decline. And it's like, we talked a few weeks ago when he was at the conference about how he got distracted by a skydiver and like wandered away from the other G7 leaders and had to be brought back to the group. But now the gloves are off and like European officials are speaking out. On Wednesday, the New York Post reported that an unnamed senior European official said Biden seemed out of it at the conference, that he appeared less physically robust than he'd seen Biden the previous fall. And again, the previous fall was when he was like literally falling down the stairs of Air Force One and falling off his bicycle. So I don't know how robust he was at the time. But this same official said it was challenging to start a conversation with Biden. And then the other leaders there apparently discussed Biden's condition privately among themselves and like made a point to slow their pace when they were walking together to avoid embarrassing him. And when he was awkward or like fucking up in front of the camera, they quote closed ranks to like shield him from the cameras and give him time to get his shit together. And when asked whether Biden could go toe to toe with the US adversary like Putin, multiple former senior European officials bluntly said no.
Well, I would have to think that they're shitting their pants right now because they're going to be the target of Putin if we're in World War III. They're right next door. I
No,
mean, they have to
they're
be wanting.
they're shitting their pants more about the loss of democracy if Trump
Yeah,
gets in
right.
office.
The right taking over. But like this is what is so maddening. Like they're all acting like the debate was just a bad night and we've been discussing this for years, okay? Like years this guy has been in just decline and he's been fumbling and falling. And anyone that hasn't seen it until now is either in denial or a fucking idiot. Like let's just call it what it is, you know?
Yeah, I'm sorry, like this shock and awe of like, wow, we had no idea he was so bad. Shut the fuck up. Like you're all
Yeah,
liars. You're all
right.
fucking liars. And so since we're on the topic of Europe and the democracy, I want to switch gears and bring attention to what's been happening in Europe this week because I think we're going to start seeing some very similar shit in the next few months in America as we get closer to the election. So, we mentioned a few weeks ago after the EU Parliament elections that there was this big shift to right wing leaders. And even though it's not going to immediately change anything in Europe, it was a really big deal because it's the most conservative shift the EU has ever seen. And when it happened, one of the biggest upsets was in France, with the right wing National Rally Party gaining more popularity than the current, like, centrist left ruling party. So the French president, Macron, he panicked, almost immediately dissolved the state cabinet, and called for snap elections. Well, those elections started this past Sunday, and it has been a complete shit show ever since. When the first round of election results were released on Sunday, the National Rally Party, which is headed by Marine Le Pen, they took 33% of the vote, and the left went into a tailspin. As soon as the results came in, tens of thousands of left wing rioters flooded the streets of Paris on Sunday night in opposition to this victory. They went full on Antifa style, smashing windows, vandalizing government property and historical monuments, launching fireworks in the streets, setting cars and buildings on fire. Riot police had to come in and like tear gas everybody, which frankly is what they need to do in the fucking United States. But my point here is that the left immediately went into riot mode, just like they do in America when things don't go their way. And then Macron made a bold move in government. So there's a bunch of different parties in France. And like in the US, where we have Congress, it's traditionally Democrat or Republican. Well, in France, they have multiple different party members in their parliament. And before the snap elections, several of the left-leaning groups, they created like a united front and they called it the New Popular Front Alliance. And so since all these little groups came together, they took second place in this first election round and got 28% of the vote. Well, the incumbent centrist party barely got 20% of the vote. Now, if the National Rally Party wins the overall election, it would be France's first right wing government since World War II. So the panic is real, right? With all these fucking leftists. So what did Macron do in response to this upset to prevent the populist movement from gaining power? He convinced 200 candidates from the left wing alliance and his own party to pull out of the election after this first round of results on Sunday to prevent the right from having a majority of seats in the National Assembly and coming into power. So, what this means is they're withdrawing candidates from these like 3 and 4-way contests to ensure that the remaining candidate that is challenging the candidate on the right in each constituency has the best chance of winning in the second round of polling, which is going to be this Sunday. And so, with all of these candidates now pulling out of the race, it's predicted that this is, going to majorly shift the numbers, and the National Rally Party's chances of winning are now pretty low. So, like, Stephanie, this is straight up sabotage and corruption. Like, this is crazy.
Oh, yeah, it's an act of desperation for sure. And I feel like that's when people start revolting. Like when these dictators refuse to give up power and listen to the will of the people, then the country's fallen. It's under an what do you call it? Authoritarian regime. I said it. But like this really freaks me out because don't you feel like this is just foreshadowing what's going to happen here in a few months? Like they're going to
Yeah.
pull all kinds of crazy shit to try to win. And then if they don't, there's going to be riots.
Yeah, exactly. There's either they're going to have some kind of riot beforehand or the pandemic. It's like we see every time. It's going to
Yeah.
be a pandemic, war, or some kind of riots so
Or
that
all
we
of the
or
above.
all the above, so that, we don't have an election, or we will have an election. And if Trump wins, then we're going to have riots for weeks, and he's not going to be in power yet. So Biden will still be in power, even if Trump wins for another few months. So, like, we're just fucked either way, because I don't see even the MAGA extremists or conservatives rioting if the election is stolen because I'm
No,
so,
because they have too much to lose.
yeah,
It's
exactly.
responsible,
Exactly.
hardworking, middle-class Americans.
Yeah, and they'll all be rounded up by the Biden admin
Hmm.
as, terrorists. So, speaking of, I want to shift away from Europe and back to the US and bring up something else that happened this week because it's just more evidence of corruption in the DOJ. So, an article came out in Just the News yesterday. There's an FBI supervisor who just became a whistleblower, and apparently he's a Democrat. And his name is being redacted from this case right now because it's fresh. And he came forward on Tuesday alleging that the FBI has been improperly suspending or revoking security clearances of agents who have conservative political views. And he apparently was in charge of security clearance reviews for all of the FBI employees on the East Coast. And he's alleging that other agents that were involved in the process had the same concerns that he does, that FBI leadership has been applying like a political litmus test for employee top secret clearance approval. And he gave one example, which was this whistleblower was assigned to a supervisory role over the case of another FBI whistleblower, and his name was Marcus Allen. And he was being investigated by the security division over concerns about his hesitancy to, quote, attest to his current vaccination status, end quote. And so when it was determined during the investigation that Allen had not violated any guidelines, higher ranking officials pushed for his security clearance to be revoked for questioning the January 6th prosecutions. And this was a legitimate case because reportedly the FBI reached a settlement agreement with Allen last month. They restored his security clearance and they paid him for 27 months of back pay and benefits that they had been withholding during his suspension. And so that was one case that this new whistleblower is alleging. And he's saying he and other agents voiced concerns about political bias taking place. And when they did, they were retaliated against and given transfers or suspensions. This guy was suspended. And in these new documents, which were sent to the House and Senate Judiciary Committees, as well as the DOJ Inspector General, the whistleblower is claiming he witnessed multiple efforts by senior FBI officials to target employees who supported Trump or who opposed COVID vaccines. And in a statement from his lawyer, Empower Oversight President Tristan Levitt. He said, quote, if an FBI employee fit a certain profile as a political conservative, they were viewed as security concerns and unworthy to work at the FBI, end quote. And again, this whistleblower is a Democrat, okay? And when I guess Just the News reached out to the FBI for comment on this new case, and of course, they've given no comment whatsoever.
Okay, so earlier when we were saying like the Biden administration is unraveling, I think we're going to see a lot of this within the government over the next few months between now and the election, because I think the left is panicking. I think that they realize Trump's going to win. And when he gets in there, they're going to be fired or possibly even face charges for abusing their power now that, they're losing a lot of power due to the Chevron doctrine being overturned. And so I think they're all going to start panicking and turning on one another to try to like set themselves up for the potential of a Trump presidency. So I think this is like the beginning of a lot of this happening within these, alphabet agencies.
Yeah, and I hope you're right. And so just to get everyone a little more riled up, I want to give a Friday fun fact because
Oh
this is
boy.
how this is how the Biden admin is spending your tax dollars, okay? So, a new analysis report released by Open the Books just came out on Wednesday, and I read this in the Daily Caller. And this new report, which is all about the White House financials, and it showed that Biden has spent nearly $225 million paying hundreds of White House staffers since the 2021 fiscal year. He has employed more staff during the 2024 fiscal year alone than any other administration since Nixon was in office in 1971. According to the report, Biden added 40,000 workers to the federal payroll during his first 3 years in office. And while most Americans, were suffering from inflation and economic problems, Biden gave his administration a 4.7% pay raise last year, which is the largest federal pay raise since the Carter administration in the 1960s. Many of these added staff members are, you guessed it, highly paid DEI employees. So payroll records show that the deputy assistant to the president for racial justice and equity, like, okay, makes $155,000 a year, and the director of global issues makes almost $170,000. The White House also employs 106 special assistants to the president. I can't even keep a straight
Are
face.
those the people that like get him up from his naps and pump him up full of Adderall?
Oh, I would not be surprised if they were. And we are paying $13.9 million for that in just the 2024 fiscal year. And on top of that, Biden is still paying pandemic response to staffers to the tune of $723,500 in salaries, even though the administration declared the pandemic was over in September of 2022. So while you're struggling to pay your mortgage or your rent or buy groceries for your family, I guess you can take comfort in the fact that the Biden admin's being well taken care of.
I mean, my jaw hit the floor. It's just like COVID all over again. While the average American's suffering, they're all laughing like in their, luxury while no one can afford groceries. But I mean, I guess those are the people that are really running the country right now because we know it's not Joe Biden. And I mean, good God, if the guy needs 106 special assistants, like, don't you think though, for real, like that's who's running the country? Like, what are
Probably.
they doing? What are these assistants? They're either nursing home people or they're running the country for him. Like, unfreaking believable.
Yeah.
Wow. Good work, Tara. That you uncovered a mess. Oh my gosh. Well, like you said earlier, it's changing day to day, hour by hour. There's, it's going back and forth. Is he staying in the race? Is he not? So we're glued to this and going to keep everybody updated. Obviously on TikTok, like we can give updates quicker, but we'll be back here with another episode on Wednesday and Friday, and we'll let you know what's going on because it keeps changing. We'll stay on top of it. But I hope everyone has a great day and thanks for tuning in. If you're sick of all the crazy shit going on in our country and you want to express your support and patriotism for the show, head on over to our Etsy store at UO Patriot Chicks and check out our new stickers. The link can also be found on our website. If you love the show and you want exclusive episodes, support the podcast and join the conversation by becoming a member of our Patreon community. We'll be posting weekly member-only podcast episodes and content that isn't available on the weekly podcast. Every Patreon member will also get a free Unapologetically Outspoken sticker and updates about our new sticker release before they're made public. And be sure to follow us on TikTok at Unapologetically Outspoken. And if you haven't done so already, please rate and review the podcast. The more you support us, the more people we can reach. So help us spread the word.